The Great Siege of Malta was a clash of civilizations. It was a fight for control of the Mediterranean Sea. The year was 1565. The Ottoman Empire, a vast Muslim power, set its sights on the island of Malta. Malta was ruled by the Knights Hospitaller, a Christian order of knights. The knights had a long history of fighting in the Crusades. They were forced out of their stronghold in Rhodes in 1522. The Holy Roman Emperor Charles V granted them Malta as a new base. Malta was strategically important. It lay in the middle of the Ottoman sea lanes. The Ottomans, led by Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent, desired Malta for several reasons. Firstly, it was a thorn in their side. It disrupted their trade and raids along the North African coast. Secondly, capturing Malta would be a symbolic victory for Islam over Christianity. It would pave the way for further Ottoman expansion into Europe. The stage was set for a momentous confrontation. Two powerful forces with centuries of history behind them were about to clash on a small island in the middle of the Mediterranean. The fate of Malta, and perhaps the balance of power in the region, hung in the balance. Tensions between the Ottomans and the Knights had been simmering for years. Raids and counter-raids were common in the waters around Malta. In 1559, the Knights attacked a large Ottoman convoy. This act finally provoked Suleiman into action. Suleiman assembled a massive fleet. He entrusted the command to two experienced admirals, Piyali Pasha and Turgut Reis. The Ottoman army was vast. It numbered around 40,000 men. They were equipped with the latest artillery. News of the impending invasion reached Malta. The Grand Master of the Knights, Jean Parisot de Valette, was a seasoned warrior. He was determined to resist. He rallied his knights. He called upon his allies in Spain and the Italian states for aid. Valette understood the importance of fortifications. He strengthened the island's defences. He focused on the key strongholds of Fort St. Elmo, Fort St. Angelo and Fort St. Michael. These forts would become the focal points of the Ottoman assault. The arrival of the Ottoman fleet in May 1565 signaled the start of one of the most famous sieges in history. The small island of Malta was about to become a battleground between two empires. The Knights of Malta were outnumbered, but they were not outmatched. They were highly trained warriors. They were equipped with the best armor and weapons of the time. They were also masters of fortification and defense. Fort St. Elmo guarded the entrance to the Grand Harbour. Fort St. Angelo stood on a promontory overlooking the harbour. Fort St. Michael protected the landward approaches to the city of Birgu. These fortresses, armed with cannons and manned by resolute knights, formed the backbone of the Maltese defences. Valette's strategy was simple but effective. He would use the island's fortifications to hold out against the Ottoman onslaught. He knew that time was on his side. The longer the Ottomans were bogged down in a siege, the more likely they were to suffer from disease, attrition, and the approaching winter storms. The Knights were aided by a contingent of Spanish soldiers. Local Maltese militia also played a vital role in the defense. They knew the terrain well. They provided valuable support to the Knights. The stage was set for a brutal and bloody struggle. The Knights were determined to fight for their faith, their order, and their island home. The Ottoman siege began in earnest in late May 1565. The Turkish fleet bombarded the Maltese fortifications from the sea. Ottoman troops landed on the island. They began to dig trenches and build siege works. The first target of the Ottoman assault was Fort St. Elmo. This small fort, situated on a spit of land jutting out into the sea, was seen as the key to the Grand Harbour. The Ottomans believed that capturing it would be a relatively easy task. The knights defending St. Elmo fought with incredible bravery. They repulsed wave after wave of Ottoman attacks. The fighting was fierce and relentless. Both sides suffered heavy casualties. The Ottomans brought up their heavy guns. They began a systematic bombardment of the fort. The walls of St. Elmo crumbled under the relentless barrage. The defenders fought on, even as the fort began to fall around them. The fall of St. Elmo, after a month of bitter fighting, was a blow to the knights. But it also came at a heavy price for the Ottomans. They had lost thousands of men in the assault. The siege was far from over. Section 5. The Fall of St. Elmo, a grim omen? The capture of Fort St. Elmo was a victory for the Ottomans, but it was a Pyrrhic victory. They had paid a heavy price for it. Thousands of their soldiers lay dead. Even their commander, Turgut Reis, was killed. For the knights, the loss of St. Elmo was a blow, but it did not break their spirit. Grandmaster Valette rallied his men. He knew the defense of the island depended on holding Fort St. Angelo and Fort St. Michael. The Ottomans turned their attention to these two remaining strongholds. They launched massive assaults on both forts. The fighting was even more intense than at St. Elmo. The knights fought with the courage of desperation. They knew their lives, and the fate of Malta hung in the balance. Despite their numerical superiority, the Ottomans struggled to make headway. The knights' defenses were too strong. The attackers were met with a hail of cannon fire, musket shot, and boiling oil. The narrow streets of Birgu, the fortified city behind Fort St. Angelo, became a killing ground for the Ottomans. The siege dragged on throughout the hot summer months. Both sides were exhausted and depleted. The outcome of the battle was still uncertain, but the tide was about to turn. The Knights and Maltese defenders faced incredible hardships during the siege. Food and ammunition were running low. The constant bombardment took its toll on their morale. The heat and unsanitary conditions led to outbreaks of disease. Yet despite these challenges, the defenders held firm. Their courage and determination never wavered. Grand Master Valette was an inspirational leader. He moved from post to post, encouraging his men and leading by example. The Knights' resistance was not only due to their military prowess, they were fighting for a cause they believed in. They were defending their faith, their order, and their home. This gave them a strength that the Ottomans, fighting far from home for a distant sultan, could not match. Moreover, the Ottomans faced their own set of problems. Their supply lines were stretched thin. The morale of their troops was waning. The summer heat and the Knights' stubborn resistance were taking their toll. The siege had reached a stalemate. The Ottomans had failed to capture the crucial forts. The Knights were clinging on, but their situation was precarious. The fate of Malta hung in the balance. As the summer of 1565 wore on, hope began to dwindle for the defenders of Malta. The Ottomans were still encamped around the island. The Knights were exhausted and running low on supplies. However, unbeknownst to both the Ottomans and the besieged Knights, a relief force was being assembled in Sicily. Don Garcia de Toledo, the Viceroy of Sicily, had been slow to respond to the Knights' pleas for help, but he finally assembled an army of around 8,000 men. The arrival of the Sicilian relief force at St. Paul's Bay on September 7, 1565, marked a turning point in the siege. The Ottomans, taken by surprise, were forced to lift the siege of Fort St. Michael and confront this new threat. The battle that followed was chaotic and bloody, but the fresh troops from Sicily, bolstered by the exhausted but resolute Knights, proved too strong for the Ottomans. The invaders were routed and driven back to their ships. The great siege of Malta was over. The Ottomans had been defeated. The Knights had achieved a stunning victory against overwhelming odds. The victory at Malta came at a heavy cost for both sides. The Ottomans suffered heavy casualties, estimated to be between 20,000 to 35,000 men. They lost their grip on the central Mediterranean. The defeat also marked a turning point in Ottoman expansion. Their aura of invincibility was shattered. The Knights, though victorious, were also severely depleted. Hundreds of Knights lay dead. Fort St. Elmo was in ruins. The island of Malta was devastated. Despite the heavy losses, the Knights had achieved a stunning victory. They had defended their island home against one of the most powerful empires in the world. Their victory resonated throughout Europe. It was hailed as a triumph for Christendom. The Knights set about rebuilding their shattered island. Fort St. Elmo was reconstructed into a more powerful fortress. A new city, named Valletta after the Grand Master, was built on the high ground overlooking the Grand Harbour. The Great Siege of Malta was a defining moment in the history of the Mediterranean. It secured the island as a Christian stronghold and a bulwark against further Ottoman expansion. The legacy of the siege lives on. It is a testament to the courage, determination, and fighting spirit of the Knights of Malta. The Great Siege of Malta had far-reaching consequences. The Ottoman defeat marked a turning point in the Mediterranean. The Ottoman Empire's aura of invincibility was dented. Their westward expansion into Europe was halted. The knights achieved a heroic victory. They defended Christendom and secured Malta. The island became a symbol of resistance. The siege impacted military architecture. Fort St. Elmo became a model for engineers. The lessons influenced fortress design for centuries. The memory of the Great Siege resonates today. The Maltese view it as a defining moment. The event is commemorated annually on September 8th. The legacy of the knights lives on in Malta's culture and identity. The Great Siege was more than a battle for a small island. It was a clash of civilizations, a fight for the soul of the Mediterranean. The courage and sacrifice of the knights ensured Malta remained a bastion of Christianity and a symbol of resistance.